These are similar problems to what you'll see on handout number 5A. And so taking a look at our first problem, we've got a solution problem. And so the way we're going to solve this is set up a little chart, and it goes the amount of solution multiplied by the rate. And the rate is typically a percent, and that's what it is in this problem here, and equals an amount of whatever the percent is of. And so in this case, an amount of salt. And so we go ahead and set up our equation, or a few equations here. It talks about a 280 liter solution is 20% salt. So we'll put 20% there. Now I'm not going to change it to a decimal because I don't want to have to deal with the decimals. As long as I'm consistent, this should work out. So I go ahead and double 280, and that gives me a 560. So I have 560, and then we go ahead and we have that extra 0 here, so we have to add in that extra 0 as well. So the next one, it says how much water with no salt should be added to make a 14% solution. So how much water? Well, this is the water. We don't know how much water, but we know that water has no salt, and so it's going to be 0%. So when we multiply those two, we get 0. And now the mix is always in the bottom. And so we're going to end up adding these two together to come up with our mix. And so it's 280 plus x. And then the mix was to be 14%. Now how do I know this is the mix? Because it says to make. So to make is always an idea, or a couple key words there that tell me I'm dealing now with the mix. And the mix needs to be 14%. So what we need to do is use that distributive property. Multiply 14 by x, I know that's 14x, and then just multiply 14 times by that 280. And so when I do that, I end up with this 3920. And so from this point, all I'm going to end up doing is adding these two equations together, the two parts together, the water and the 20%, and it'll equal the mix. And so it's going to be 5,600 equals 14x plus the 3920. And so all I'm going to do is subtract that 3920 from both sides. Take it away from both sides there. And that leaves me with 1,680 equals 14x. And so all I have to do there is divide by 14, and we'll have our answer. So I do that division, I end up with 120 liters equals x. And so that would be the how much water it says, and that's the amount of water that I'd end up needing. Well, the next problem, same sort of thing, except instead of a salt mixture, it's going to be an acid mixture. So I do the same sort of setup. It's an amount of solution, and we're going to multiply by a rate, and that rate is a percentage, again, of acid, and it's going to end up equaling an amount of acid. And then from that point, I go ahead and fill in my chart. A solution contains 30% acid is to be mixed with 50% acid. A solution containing 50% acid. So 30% of 50%, so we have a low percentage, a high percentage, and then we get that key phrase again, to make. So it tells me now I'm dealing with the mix. So the mix is going to be 200 liters. So they're giving us how much we're supposed to have at the end, 200 liters of a 42% solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to call one of these x. Now which one should we call x? Well, let's look at what they're asking for. How much of the 30% do we need? So we're going to call the 30% or x, and then the other one, since I'm given a total, it's got to go total minus x. And so I go ahead and multiply across. So I've got 30x equals 2 times 5 makes 10, and then I'll have 3 zeros there, minus 50x. And these get added together, and then doubling 42 gives me 8,400. And so that's what I'm going to set up. So I've got 30x plus 10,000, then minus 50x equals 8,400. And so I'm going to end up subtracting that 10,000 from both sides. So when you do that, make sure you end up borrowing a little bit. And so if you think about it, we've got 600. It will give us an extra 400 plus 600 makes 1,000, and then 1,000 plus the 8,000 plus the extra 1,000 gives me 10,000. So 1,600 equals, and then I got to collect these two terms here. Negative 50 plus 30 gives me negative 20x, and then I'm going to just do the division. So divide by the negative 20, and x ends up equaling, 2 goes into 16. This is going to be a negative 1,600 as well. 8 times, and we end up canceling out 2 zeros, so just 80. So there it is. 80 of the 30% is needed. 80, and these are, let's see here, liters it looks like. 80 liters of the 30%. So going back to the problem though real quick, it makes sense because you look at 42, and 42 is closer to 50, and then 42 then to 30. So we know we've got to have more of the 50%, and we would have more of the 50%. We would have 120 liters of the 50%. All right, well, let's take a look at our next one. An airplane flew 4 hours with a 20-mile-an-hour tailwind. So what we've got here is a distance equals rate times time problem. So we've got this tailwind. Tailwind means that you are adding the rate of the wind to the rate of the plane. So it doesn't tell us how far we went, so we don't know. So we'll just put a d in for the distance, but we know a component of the rate. We don't know the plane speed, and that's actually what we want to find. How fast the plane went in still air. So r represents the plane speed in still air, plus the 20-mile-an-hour tailwind. Now plus because we are adding the rate of the wind to the plane because it took us less time. That's what happens when you got a tailwind. You go faster. It only took 4 hours, so I put the 4 right there. Now, against the wind, against means that we are going to end up going slower. That's why it took more time. So it's the return trip. Return trip means that it's going to end up being the same distance. So I'm going to use the same variable, d, for that distance, but now it's going to be an r minus 20 because, again, we're going against the wind. And it took us 5 hours to do this. So we're going to go ahead and set these two equations equal. See how this expression right here, this 4 times by the r plus 20, that equals d. I'm going to put it in for this d right here. So I got now 4 times by r plus 20 equals 5 times by r minus 20. And I go ahead and distribute, so now I have 4r plus 80 equals 5r minus 100. And so now I go ahead and solve, so I'm going to do that by just doing opposite operations here, so subtract 4r from all sides, and I'll go ahead and add this 100 to both sides. And so now I've got 180 equals r, and that's my answer. Right there, gave it to me. So 180 miles per hour. Well, 2 cars leave town at the same time, going in opposite directions this time. So we've got opposite directions look like this. Here's the town, this dot, and we got these 2 cars. One's going slower, one's going faster. And we know that eventually they'll be 297 miles apart. So that's what the drawing looks like. Let's go ahead and set up an equation. Distance equals rate times by time. So we got a slow car, and we'll say its rate is 44. We know that. We know that they left at the same time, so we're going to use, we don't know what that time is, but we're going to use the same variable t. Then we have a fast car, and it's going 55 miles an hour. Again, we're going to use the same variable t for the time. Now their distances. We don't know their distances, but we know together they add to make 297. So let's do this. Let's call one of them d. I'll call the slower one d. So this is d. How am I going to write an expression for the faster one? Well, it's going to be 297 minus d. It's kind of like this rate problem that we did, where we had the total of 200, and then we had an unknown x. And so we did the other rate, or the other amount of solution was the total minus x. Same thing here. We have a total, 297 miles, minus the distance the slower car went, gives us the distance the faster car went. So 297 minus d. So now what we're going to do is just substitute. Take that 44t, put it in for d right here, and this is what we've got. 297 minus 44t equals 55t. So we can go ahead and solve this by doing some opposite operations here. We'll add this 44t to both sides. And so when we do that, now we've got this 297 equals 99t. And so what we need to do from this point is just divide. Divide by 99, and we'll have our answer. So there it is, 3. 3 is how many times 99 goes in there. 3 hours equals the time. So there is our answer. Well, those are problems you'll see on tonight's homework. Good luck.